Syracuse football missing a bowl game here in 2021 at 5-7, but Dino Babers will be around for 2022. We got John Casillo on the line from Noon's Magician on SB Nation to help us break it down. Hey, John.
How's it going, Mark?
It's going pretty well. Thanks for coming on board. It's got to be disappointing not to make a bowl game. It shortens the college football season, and suddenly, okay, the football season ends at the end of November, and you got to wait all the way until next September to see Syracuse football.
I mean, I'm kind of used to it, unfortunately. At the same time, as you know, college football content engine never stops. We got early signing period, signing day, spring practice, and then before you know it, you're right back in the swing of things next summer.
And it's been magnified by this transfer portal, of course, which is going
100%.
crazy in all directions. So let's get to the Syracuse football team before we touch on Dino Babers in particular, because I saw most of the Wake Forest game. You take a team that will be playing in the ACC championship game on Saturday to overtime. I saw the Florida State game, a game that was lost with the last-second field goal that could have been won. A lot of impressive performances that were culminated in narrow losses. Clemson on a Friday night, a field goal loss to a team that's maybe still the best team in the conference. But when you add it all up near the end of the schedule, when there was an opportunity to get to 6 wins, there were some blowout losses. So what are your thoughts on the progression or lack thereof of the team in 2021?
I mean, obviously, after last season, you go 1-10, anything is an improvement for the most part. But I think most fans at this point of the program would say, well, there's no reason why you should have been 1-10 to begin with last year. So 5-7 in year 2 is very different than 5-7 in year 6 when SU hasn't made a bowl game now for 3 straight seasons after the 2018 breakthrough at 10 wins. I think fans understand that 5-7 was almost 7-5, and that's all well and good. But 5-7 was also almost 3-9. For as much as we had, the 3 straight 1 possession losses, we also had, in there 2 different games that were decided in the final minute in our favor. So realistically, as always, it's a razor's edge. But in particular, here with the Syracuse team, the first, 8 games or so, 8 or 9 games really, where we're all pretty tightly contested, and the last 3 games were tough. I think the last 3 games to me were in part due to injury. Chris Elmore, fullback, he was out. You had some injuries to Chris Bleich, guard on the team, Carlos Federello on the line, also out. So some injuries there were part of it. But the other part was just, unimaginative play calling. And I think teams started to figure out mobile QB Garrett Schrader, where, he had a lot of RPOs. But for the most part, it was really a running team for those first 9 games. And I think once teams figured out that the only thing we could really do was either run Tucker or have Schrader take off with it, I think you started to see things get a little undone.
Talking Syracuse football, we got John Casillo on the line from Noon's Magician on SB Nation. Check out his work right there as we head into the off season. Please like the video and share these videos out on social media and subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football. Dino Babers extended, as you confirmed to me before we started to record, during and after that 2018 10-3 season, but it's announced that he will be back in 2022. How is the fan base responding to that? What is your response to that?
I mean, SU's a private school, since there's only so much you can get from a contract perspective, but rumors are that it's a pretty prohibitive buyout right now. It won't be as much so next year. And as I think, as anyone listening knows, Syracuse isn't one of these football factories that has a, bag of cash to throw at these sorts of situations. Because remember, it's not just the buyout. You're also paying potentially a buyout for the next coach and his salary and his staff's salary going forward. And obviously Syracuse and a lot of other programs just don't have that sort of money. You're seeing plenty thrown around by the likes of, LSU, USC, and others, but we don't have that sort of cash, and neither does Duke or Wake or a bunch of other teams. So I think fans are resigned to understanding that part of it. It doesn't mean that it's any easier to stomach. I mean, we missed a bowl now 5 of the last 6 seasons. Dino's been in charge for all of those. Everyone appreciates what the 10-win season was, The problem is we haven't been able to build on it and have actually potentially like regressed since. So that creates a bit of a problem with the fan base, and especially with a tough 2022 slate ahead. I think a lot of fans see it as a little bit of a lame duck year, and I think now it's going to be really hard to overcome that on the recruiting trail if you're trying to attract talent to turn things around really quickly in 2022.
John, you mentioned Wake Forest. Does their success cause more fans to say, why not us? Look at them. If they can do it, why can't we?
Oh yeah, and that conversation's there, and I think there's some easy answers there. You know, Wake, while smaller than Syracuse even, does have a lot of local wealthy alums who invest in the program. Their indoor practice facility, you know, is arguably second only to Clemson's in terms of, you know, what they have, you know, for players. SU only has an indoor practice facility for less than 10 years. And it really, all that did, it didn't put us ahead of anyone in the ACC. It got us caught up to the rest of the ACC. And I think people forget that, you know, those years in the Big East were pretty lean, and catching up takes a lot of effort first and foremost. And then you need an additional influx of money and resources and time to then start getting to the middle of the pack. Wake's also done a much smarter job in terms of investing its resources, but also investing in scheduling. I mean, I've beat this drum for years that, you know, Syracuse needs to schedule a 4-0 non-conference slate if it wants to, you know, fix its station in college football. And SU did it for a year or two here and there, but between the Notre Dame schedule, some other difficult games that have been put on the slate in recent years, like, it's until you can get to that point, excuse me, and go 4-0, you're putting yourself behind the 8 ball. And Wake has repeatedly put itself in front of things and has allowed itself to create a narrative every year where, oh, Wake's 4-0, I guess they're ranked. And then Wake's 5-0, I guess they're ranked, and 6-0 and 7-0 and so forth. Wake puts itself in front of the narrative, and like, of course Wake's coming back. Look how they start every year, while Syracuse will start every year 2-2, perhaps, and then they're spending the rest of October trying to get out of that hole.
Sean Tucker was good enough this year that I heard him talked about on national shows that otherwise nobody was talking about Syracuse. As you mentioned, a team like Syracuse is going to start to get some attention if it goes 4-5-0 or beats somebody of significance like they have in the past. But if it's a 2-2 start, you're never going to hear about Syracuse on a national show. But Sean Tucker was good enough that I heard him talked about each week, even if it was for 20 seconds, 1,500 yards, 13 touchdowns. And so he's the guy, he's the marquee guy that people, hey, and even in previewing ACC games throughout the year, if Syracuse was coming up, opposing team media that would normally be like, yeah, I haven't seen a Syracuse game this year, don't know their personnel. Sean Tucker, I know him. Their freshman running back's outstanding. Okay, so he tweets after the 31-14 loss to Pitt that he's not pleased with the outcome of the game or the play calling. And when he says good luck to all the seniors moving on, it's easy to read into what that may mean.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think he sent that out after our offensive coordinator was fired, Sterling Gilbert. Longtime Dino protege, went elsewhere for a bit, came back around at SU. Last 2 years have been pretty rough offensively. And like, you know, that ultimately falls to Gilbert. In 2 seasons, you really couldn't get anything done. And I think for Tucker, someone who had less than 20 carries in each of the last 3 games of the season, when you're one of the top 3 running backs in the country, like, to me, it's play calling malpractice in that you have a very good play. They have, again, one of the best players on the field, despite the issues play calling, despite the fact that we didn't have much of a passing game, despite the offensive line issues, and you couldn't figure out to hand him the ball. I think it was a moment of frustration, but one I agree with. And I think if I'm him and you are the best player on the team, you have the power to, you know, influence who gets hired as the offensive coordinator, for who the coaching staff goes and gets in the transfer portal. You're sending a signal out that you have more power as a player now than you used to, and you can do something about it if you're not satisfied with, you know, what Coach Babers and what the administration does to fix this year's issues.
Always enjoy the conversation with John Casillo. Joined him and the rest of the crew there at Noon's Magician on SB Nation, talking Syracuse football after a 5-7 campaign, with National Signing Day now 13 days away. I'm looking at 10 hard commits, last in the ACC, number 74 in the nation. Now, those are the hard numbers. That's the surface story. Is there anything beyond that that brings a little bit more hope, or is it that dire?
I don't think there's a great story right now around recruiting, to be perfectly honest. It's well documented. SU's in New York. It's not necessarily a talent-rich state, just in terms of like who you can get from in-state schools. You have the fact that you're coming off a 1-10 season. This season didn't turn out as planned. Dino looks like a little bit of a lame duck in 2022, barring a turnaround. So, like, how do you sell that? To top recruits. I mean, SU had a lot of guys, especially in defensive backs where we've had success, was recruiting a lot of 4-star guys, a lot of high threes, guys who you want to be able to sell in, bring them in early. I mean, Deuce Chestnut this year was one of those guys last recruiting cycle. This time around, he ends up getting votes for Defensive Rookie of the Year and Rookie of the Year for the ACC. So we have success there. It has happened, but we're in a spot in the program's trajectory now where, like, how do you sell in the future anymore? And then even if you're selling in, near-term playing time, players aren't necessarily sure that the guys recruiting them are still going to be there by the time they're starting to get significant snaps. So I think this is going to have to be a transfer-heavy offseason. We've lost a lot of players to the transfer portal already, and we're probably going to lose a few more before this offseason wraps up. So to me, I think that this is going to be an interesting offseason, but also like a make or break kind of offseason if you're Babers and his staff, because you really need to hit the ground running and fix. I mean, maybe there's conversations going on behind the scenes, but right now, like 10-man class with 2 weeks to go is not great when you look at how much talent's a part of the program.
2018 was a long time ago. Folks, check out John's work there at Noon's Magician on SB Nation. John, we appreciate you stopping by, as always.
Of course, Mark.